On today's show, we've got a very special guest. He's very well known in the world of biblical archaeology, biblical history, Egyptology, all kinds of things. His name is Ahmed Osman. Many of you will know him from books such as this, Moses and Akhenaten, as well as The House of the Messiah, written off the back. Stranger in the Valley of Kings and Out of Egypt. Ahmed, thank you very much for joining me on this show. This is really interesting stuff, isn't it? Because this redates all kind of things. It retells the story of all kinds of different things. So, you want to tell us how you got into this and how it all came to you?
It all started a long time ago. I come from Egypt. I have been in England and London for about 44 years now. Right. When I was a young boy, it was 1948 when the State of Israel was established. Mm-hmm. At that time, there was a conflict between Egypt and the rest of the Arab world and Israel. They didn't want the State of Israel. And I was a young boy of about 14. And to tell you the truth, I was one of these fanatics. Thus always, at 14 years, I was very religious and Islamic. I'm Muslim.
Right.
So we were taught, I was part of a group of an Islamic brotherhood. And they told us that we have nothing to lose if we fight the Israelis, the Jews. Because they regard them as the enemy of God. And if I was able to defeat the enemies of God, then I have done it as a victory.
You'll be in paradise.
And if I die in the process, I have nothing to, I immediately, straight away, I'll be in paradise. So, in fact, I tried to enroll for a group, volunteers to go under. But luckily enough, I was under age 14. They wouldn't allow me because they said under 16 you're not allowed.
Right.
So I did go. My brothers who went there were, defeated. I don't know whether they went to paradise or not. But anyhow, the war was over. By the time the Second War was coming about, I started to think. I have already left the Brotherhood and I went into different philosophical kind of try to realize what's going on, who are we, and question things. And they wanted to know an answer.
You started to think for yourself.
It seemed to me at the time, because we were occupied in Egypt by the British, and the French occupied Syria and Lebanon and North Africa. But eventually they left. They were there to leave sometime. However, I realized that the Israelis, the Jews in Israel, they were claiming they were not coming to occupy and leave sometime in the future. They came to settle. They claimed the same land for themselves. And they had a kind of a holy feeling about it. It is the Bible. God gave them this land as a promised land and so on. So I realized that this same land is claimed as a holy land for both sides. So the war, for me, seemed to be holy not only for us, but for them as well. So I wanted to know whether this holy thing is, what is it? What is behind it? For us Muslims, we only read the Bible. We don't, the Quran. We never read the Bible. So I tried to read the Bible and see what is the holy message, why they are. So I started to read the Bible, and I realized that the whole thing started when a Hebrew tribe, because the Hebrews were a group of people, immigrants to Canaan in about 15th century BC. So one of these tribes came to Egypt And because of its relationship with the royal family of Egypt, with the pharaonic family, first through Joseph, who became a minister, one of the ministers of Pharaoh.
This is the Joseph with his multicolored
Joseph with the multicolored coat. Okay. And then again with Moses, who was brought up in the royal palace. It's because of this connection between this Hebrew tribe and the royal family of Egypt that they became important. That Moses, the great hero and prophet of the Jews, was born in Egypt, brought up in the royal palace. He got the Ten Commandments, the Bible. He received the Bible on Mount Sinai, the Egyptian Sinai. So, and then after coming to Egypt as a tribe, insignificant tribe, they went out as a nation. So I thought that the whole root of whatever was going on must have taken place in ancient history. In our country, they came as a Hebrew tribe, they left as an Israeli nation. So what happened? And I thought that this conflict that didn't seem to be an ordinary political conflict, because if you have a disagreement, Germany and France had a disagreement during the war. However, after the war, they became friends. So we were not able, and maybe still are not able until now, to discuss it together and come to a conclusion and become friends. So I thought there must be some kind of taboo which lies in our common ancient history. So I decided to see, if these biblical stories, which are, by the way, the same stories in the Quran, Moses, Joseph, and Jesus, all these stories are the same, almost the same in the Quran. So we believe in it in the same way. So if these stories were just kind of fairy tales to justify belief, or was it, does it have historical roots? Is it historically correct, or it's just fairy tales? Because nowadays, people, humanities in the West, in our countries as well, seem to have a split character. When we think of medicine, or economics, or we think scientifically. We rely on proof, evidence that we can have and touch. However, when we talk about any religious subject, it's a matter of like a dream, like a fairy tale. Because of this situation, it's okay if you believe in God, if you believe in magic, if you believe in whatever you want to believe in. Belief really, for me, is an individual thing. It is not a social thing. Everybody has a right to believe in whatever they want to believe in.
Absolutely.
However, our social life, our history, our common life has to be to rely not on belief, which is personal, but on something common that we can all rely on, which is science and historical knowledge. What I decided to do is to come to London, to come to England, hoping that I can make some research and study.
Right.
And at the time, I thought, you see, that maybe this connection between Bible stories and history of Egypt have been resolved. I thought so. But when I came here, I realized that in fact it was something new. And there was a different kind of disagreement. And then no character of the Bible, Moses, for instance, Joseph, and they were not identified where they lived and who, under which pharaoh and which. There was disagreement. The only thing is what the Ten Commandments, the film of
the one with Charlton Heston in.
Charlton Heston is that is the pharaoh of oppression was Ramses II and so on. This is the general popular idea, but no evidence of anything had been established. So I had to go through with an evening course in London University to study ancient Egyptian history for 3 years, then ancient language hieroglyphic reading for about another 3 years, after that, I could find nothing as well, so I went to the British Museum Library. It was a British Museum before it moved out, and I started research, my own research. I realized that the translation of the Bible, of the book of Genesis, where the story of Joseph is, and the book of Exodus, Moses' story, is sometimes the English King James translation does not fit the Arabic translation. So I thought I better go to the Hebrew text. So I had to teach myself a little bit of Hebrew, and Hebrew being a Semitic language is not difficult for me because it is similar in many ways to Arabic, and in many ways the book of Exodus to Egyptian colloquial language. So I was able to do that. After a long research, I was sitting one day, it was cold winter, midnight, my wife and my daughter went to bed, and I went to bed with them. However, I got up, I couldn't sleep. So I went to wake them up. I just put on the fire, make myself a cup of tea, and I sat down by the fire reading the story of Genesis, the story of Joseph in Genesis, as I had read it before many times. But on that night, I saw a clue that I didn't see before. It was the story of Joseph when his brothers came for the second time to get wheat for the family because they didn't have enough rain in Canaan. So when they came for the second time, Joseph invited them to have a meal with him in his house. He let him sit alone, and he sat on his own, and the Egyptian attendants sat on their own, and they have a meal. But in an emotional moment, he felt he wanted to reveal his true identity to them. Yeah. He recognized them being the same Bedouin, and they didn't recognize him. He was now an Egyptian, dressed in Egyptian, talk in Egyptian, and he talked to them through an interpreter. So he asked his Egyptian attendant to leave the place, and he revealed his identity. I am your brother, Joseph. So they felt ashamed of themselves. They sold him into slavery, and he's treating them well, and so on. And they tried to apologize. So I told them, it is not you who brought me here. It's God who brought me here and made me father to Pharaoh. Father to Pharaoh. This moment, I have read it many times before, but I realized that this was an Egyptian title. Eat Neter en Neptawi, the Holy Father of the Lord of the Two Lands. And this was a very rare situation, because Pharaoh usually is the father. I mean, if Pharaoh appoints some official or minister in some area, look, he has a title, the son of Pharaoh, over this area. Yeah. So usually the son of Pharaoh. Tutankhamun was about 19 when they appointed somebody in Nubia about 80 years, and he had the title of son of Pharaoh. Right. So how come this is the father of Pharaoh? This is a very rare situation. And it is in this case, we had only one character who had this title. He's called Yuya. He was a minister of Amenhotep III, the father of Akhenaten. Amenhotep III. So, and the reason he had this title is that Amenhotep III, Pharaoh Amenhotep III, married the daughter of his minister Yuya. He married her and made her his queen. So he is the father-in-law of the king. Right. That's why he got this very rare title, you see. So I could not sleep until the morning when I went to the library and got the book of Yuya's tomb and so I realized that everything to do with Joseph, I found it in Yuya's. First of all, Yuya, his name is written in his tomb. His tomb was found in 1905 in the Valley of the Kings. He's buried among the royalties, he and his wife. And there's nothing on the walls of the tomb, only on the boxes, information. His name was written on different boxes, different items of the furniture or tomb furniture. In every case, his name was spelled differently. Sometimes Yaya, sometimes Yuyu, sometimes Yuya, and so on. So it must be thought that the reason for that must be that this guy was a foreigner, and the scribes who wrote the things did not agree on how to spell his name, you see. But anyhow, every name, every time is called the Y-A-Y-O-U, so it's a Yod in Hebrew, Yod, which is the name of Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahweh. So because the Egyptians usually relate a person in his name to his god, or Ra, Mos, to Hod, and so on. So they must have related this foreigner to his Yahweh God.
Right.
You see, this is what they thought. And then I realized in this thing that Joseph is Joseph in Hebrew and in Arabic. It must have been, his name must have been a combined name of two elements, because also in the story of Joseph, when Pharaoh appointed him in his position, he gave him an Egyptian name, started with Seth, Yosef.
Yeah.
Seth is an Egyptian part. And we have a story written by later Manetho during the Ptolemies, 3 centuries BC, relating that Amenhotep III has a minister called Seth.
Yep.
When we know that he had a minister called Yu. So Yusef must have been the same name, you see.
Right.
So I was able to come to identify Joseph as the same character of Yuya, who was a minister of Amenhotep III.
Right.
And Amenhotep III married his daughter, Queen Tai, who brought Akhenaten. Here,
so you've got a distinct link. You've got the name, and you've got the father of Pharaoh working together perfectly.
Not only this, there are only other two things. When Pharaoh, according to the Bible, appointed Joseph in his position, he gave him 3 things: a golden, his ring, because he's a minister, he has to sign, his ring, a golden necklace, and a small chariot. The 3 things were found in the tomb of Yuya.
So you've got tangible evidence too.
Yeah. Not only that, but Yuya was the first person in Egypt to be appointed as general of the chariots. The chariots.
Right.
Yeah. Because the Egyptians started to use chariots from the beginning, almost the beginning of the 18th dynasty. However, the chariots, because they were just starting, they were part of the army. Didn't have a separate kind of force. But from the time of Yuya, they became separate part of the army, and they had a general, and Yuya was the first thing. And in the Bible, we have a story saying that Joseph, when Jacob, his father, came with the Israelites, he went out with the chariot to meet them. When Jacob died and he went out to Canaan to bury his father, he took the chariots with him. So Yuya is responsible for the chariots. It is evident that Joseph was responsible. The king gave him a chariot at his appointment as a sign of his job. So this is
it's a serious build-up of evidence.
Serious historic, archaeological evidence. This is the first time we have these chariots of war. So now I had established the first link between a biblical character. I have been able to identify a biblical character in history of Egypt. I started to see the next step, Moses, you see. And the point is if you think about the Bible, they make a lot of separation on time between Joseph and Moses. They say the end of the book of Genesis says Moses died, and the beginning of the book of Exodus says, and now a new Pharaoh rose in Egypt who did not know Joseph, and then start the oppression of the Israelites. You think there is too much difference. And the book of Exodus, when I try to identify Moses, I have to identify, I have to prove that Moses and Akhenaten lived at the same time in the same place.
Right, yeah.
We have to prove time and place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if there's similarity in his teaching alone, it doesn't make the two people the same.
No.
It can be similar.
Yeah.
They have to have lived in the same time and the same place, same address. This is the only way.